Welcome to Grumpy Vegan Grandad. So as some of you may be aware, I'm a truck driver and I go on long, sometimes boring journeys along the motorways and A roads of the UK. And I listen to a bit of music. Sometimes I can, depending on what wagon I have, I can play things over the sound system from my phone, maybe listen to YouTube chats and videos. But more often than not, I listen to Radio 4 because they have like interesting documentaries on there and sometimes plays and stories. So it keeps me occupied during the dull drives down the motorways. But the other week I was listening to a documentary on Radio 4 show called Costing the Earth, which is like a documentary about the Earth and the planet and global warming and all this stuff. Just general sort of everything about the planet, society. And this was about superbugs and antibiotics. So instantly I was like, whoa, okay. So I listened to this and I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. So I've actually downloaded the program. I'm hoping I'm not going to get copyright strikes with this, but I'm going to I've cut it down into sections and I've got some of the interesting bits. So I'm going to play little bits and comment on it for you. So the radio show is called Costing the Earth Swimming in Superbugs, and I'm going to link the show in the comments down below, so you can listen to the full radio show when you finish watching this, if you wish. So, first things first.
For today's Costing the Earth, I'll be investigating the presence of antibiotic-resistant bacteria in our seas. In other words, am I about to go swimming in superbugs? Sally Davis is the UK Special Envoy for Antimicrobial Resistance.
Antibiotic resistance, AMR, is a massive problem already. 33,000 deaths in Europe alone each year. Drug-resistant TB is killing people across Africa and Russia at a great rate. So we need to get on top of this now, because what is threatened by AMR is modern medicine. This could lead to the post-antibiotic apocalypse.
Now, straight away, there's some pretty frightening words going on there. The antibiotic apocalypse. It's like, and we've all known this for a long time. We know this. We're heading for a big fall. We've already got a virus now that we're all aware of. The big C that's going around, and there's nothing can kill it at the moment. There's nothing we can do about it. It's not curable. There's no vaccine, anything at the moment. So we're already hitting sort of how things are going to look in the future. What's going to happen gradually, more and more and more. But that's not the crux of this story. The story is the environmental issues concerning antibiotic use. So let's carry on.
We know that up to 70 or 80% of the antibiotics that we take or that are fed to farm animals are excreted in urine or in the feces. And so these antibiotics remain active and can continue to select for antibiotic resistance. And this contributes then to the spread of antibiotic resistance in the environment.
Right, so that's actually quite a shocking statistic in itself, really, isn't it? That basically 70 or 80% of any antibiotics I take or you take or any antibiotic prescribed to animals in farms are just going into the environment because there's nowhere else for them to go.
I mean, if you look at this about antibiotic use in farm animals, it's saying here that this is the NHS site, actually. This is the NHS site. This is going into like antibiotic use in farm animals threatens human health. Because not only are we eating, if you eat meat or animal products, you are ingesting antibiotics, residues or superbugs. They are also excreting, urinating traces and some of these superbugs into the environment as well. But I've gone on this site here, theworldcounts.com, and it's literally a real-time display of what's being used. And at the moment, it's saying that 118,974 tons of antibiotics have been used on livestock to this point this year. Around 160,000 tons of antibiotics are fed to farm animals annually in 2020, so it's going to be more. Under the current trends, this number will be 200,000 tons by 2030. Today's antibiotics are routinely fed to livestock, poultry and fish on industrial farms. 80% of all antibiotics used in the United States are fed to farm animals. And this isn't United States specific. This is worldwide. In every single country where we use intensive farming and factory farming methods and cramming all these animals into small areas, they've got to give them antibiotics just to survive these lethal conditions where bugs and viruses can like multiply and rampage. I mean, we've only got to look back to World War II when especially the Japanese treatment of prisoners of wars, where they kept them in cramped conditions, like the bridge over the River Kwai. They were dying of dysentery and beriberi, loads of diseases that are totally curable, but they were rampant, absolutely rampant, because there was no control. And this is what's happening with the farmed animals. So not only are we ingesting them, they're also going into the environment. But this gets worse. So let's listen on, because this does get worse, and it's something that I've never even thought of.
That's right. Every time you use antibiotics, the antibiotics kill or prevent certain bacteria from reproducing. But unfortunately, some bacteria may have a mutation which enables them to resist the antibiotic. So when the antibiotic is used, it kills off the ones that are sensitive, and then the resistant ones can survive and proliferate.
So what he's saying there is, yes, we can use antibiotics and they do the job, but the resistant ones, right, the ones that are the most dangerous, they're left free roam. They can then proliferate. They can expand. They can multiply because the competition has been taken away. It's getting a bit frightening, this. So a little later on in this documentary, they go on to talk about human sewage. Now, I didn't know this personally, but they're using human sewage to put on fields to fertilise crops. But not only are they using UK human sewage to spread on crops, they're importing it. Listen to this.
Well, some sewage can be spread on land, and indeed recently it has been reported that nearly 30,000 tonnes of human sewage has been imported from the Netherlands to spread on land in the UK. The concern with spreading human sewage onto farmland is that human sewage will contain antibiotic residues. It will also contain antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
30,000 tonnes from another country to spread on our fields, to fertilise crops. And they've got residues of antibiotics in them. So we should be very, very concerned as vegans that food that we are eating has been fertilised with human fertilizer, but also animal fertilizer that has residues of antibiotics in and antibiotic resistant microbes in it. It's not just the meat eaters who are at danger from this shit. So this next bit is a chat with a young lady called Anne Leonard, who's been doing studies on coastal waters and the proliferation of antibiotic resistant bugs in our oceans and on our coast, and have a listen to what she's got to say.
Anne, hi. So you were involved in a project called Beach Bums. Tell me about that.
I did the Beach Bum survey as part of my PhD. My research is on antibiotic resistant bacteria in coastal bathing waters. In that project, we looked at antibiotic resistant bacteria. These were E. coli that we were interested in. We had previously quantified the abundance of resistant E. coli in bathing waters, but we wanted to know whether people who use those environments on a regular basis were actually colonised by resistant bacteria that they had potentially swallowed at the beach. So we recruited nearly 300 people. About half of them were surfers, people who go surfing on a regular basis, and about half of them were people who generally don't go bathing, who stay on land and don't go swimming or surfing. We asked them to take rectal swabs. So this rectal swab collects a tiny bit of their gut bacteria, and then we can process that in the lab to see whether they contain any of the antibiotic resistant bacteria we were interested in. And we found that surfers were 3 times as likely to have bacteria in their gut.
3 times?
3 times as likely to have bacteria in their gut that are resistant to a particular antibiotic compared to people who don't go in the water.
Very frightening statistic. 3 times as more likely to have this bacteria in the gut, antibiotic resistant bacteria, just by doing a simple leisure activity like surfing. But our kids go in the oceans, we all like to swim in the oceans. All right, surfers spend a lot more time in the oceans than we do, and probably ingest it by breathing in, swallowing, maybe a little bit of a whoosh up the bum, depending on how you land. But do you see what I mean? It's very, very. Let's see what they go on before I start saying it's frightening. I don't want to be alarmist, but it's not as bad as all that yet.
Wow.
But we don't know whether these people that have these resistant bacteria actually go on to develop resistant infection. They could just be carrying these bugs but not getting sick. The other thing that we could be concerned about is that they pass them on to other people in the community who are vulnerable to infection.
So they could be ingested, they could be living in the gut, they could be sitting there dormant, not affecting the person themselves because they're young and fit, which surfers usually are. But it could be passed on to other people. Now we know how quickly viruses can get passed on by all this wash hands and wearing masks and all this stuff. So we know now how easily germs and bacteria can be passed on from one to another. So there is the concern at the moment. So this is a guy in the US, and he's been studying dolphins, and he's found that, yes, they're being affected by this shit. Dolphins wildlife, one of our closest relatives for intelligence and family life and sociability, the dolphin, has been affected. Listen on.
Humans aren't the only mammals showing signs of resistant bugs in their bodies. Adam Schaefer is an epidemiologist who has researched the presence of bacteria in dolphins in Florida.
I've been a part of a large health assessment study where a particular population of dolphins that live in the Indian River Lagoon, so it's a big coastal estuary on the east coast of Florida. We're taking swabs, so we're taking samples from the dolphins from 3 different sites from their blowhole. So that gives us an idea of what they might be breathing in and out. We also take fecal swabs as well, and then gastric fluid swabs to get an idea of kind of the full range of microbes that these animals have.
So what did the testing work reveal?
Well, we were able to sample about 171 individual dolphins, and of the bacteria that we cultured from them, which was about 733 different bacterial isolates, over 80% exhibited resistance to at least one antibiotic that we wouldn't have expected. And we found some really surprising results where we saw some resistance patterns in the bacteria that used to see in a human hospital, which raises a lot of questions, right? Because these dolphins aren't taking antibiotics, they're not being prescribed anything, but they're obviously exposed, and these resistant bacteria are in the environment.
So that speaks for itself. People get resistant. Hospital bugs become resistant because they're exposed. There's a lot of exposure to antibiotics for things to proliferate, and dolphins. We're hurting the fucking dolphins. So what's happened here is they've taken a sample from a river outlet that goes into the bay that they're actually recording this show on, and they've grown the bacteria on petri dishes, and let's see what the results.
So on this agar plate, we didn't add any antibiotics, and you can see that there's perhaps 100 of these dots.
Yeah, it's just dotted with little colonies, and it looks a little bit like something which I've left in my fridge too long.
And on this one, I added an antibiotic to the agar called cefotaxime, and you can see that there are no bacterial colonies.
Right, okay, yeah, that one is absolutely clear. That means that cefotaxime has been very effective. It's killed everything, nothing's been able to grow.
Exactly, there weren't any bacteria in our water sample that were resistant to this antibiotic. However, we tested for resistance to another antibiotic called ampicillin, which is quite a commonly used antibiotic. And on this plate we have perhaps 4 blue dots, so 4 E. coli colonies, and maybe 10 pink.
Yeah, I can see those. They're really quite pronounced. And you're telling me those are E. coli, so that means that those E. coli are resistant to the ampicillin.
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
So you ingest some of this E. coli, and you want antibiotics to cure you, help you, and kill this bacteria in your body. Ain't going to work. It is not going to work. And that is flowing into our oceans from our rivers. Crazy.
And the problem is that resistance doesn't just stay in those bugs.
No, so bacteria are able to share genes, including resistance genes, with completely different species that are completely unrelated by a process called horizontal gene transfer. One method of sharing is that they produce like a thin arm that pokes another bacteria, and it can pass a section of DNA through this arm into another bacteria, which then that bacteria can incorporate into its DNA.
One method of sharing is that they produce like a thin arm that pokes another bacteria, and it can pass a section of DNA through this arm into another bacteria, which then that bacteria can incorporate into its DNA.
Wow. So this antibiotic resistant bacteria grows a fucking arm. It fucking pokes a totally unrelated bacteria in the same environment, injects the resistant DNA, antibiotic resistant DNA, into that fucking microbe, and makes that resistant to antibiotics. My God. See what I mean? See what I mean?
So if you, say, are exposed to this bacteria in the environment that has developed this resistance gene but is not something that will harm you, you ingest it into your body and then it starts residing in your gut and you get a pathogen later on, it can then pass that resistance gene to a pathogen, which will make...
So, these superbugs, we're causing antibiotic resistant superbugs to proliferate in the environment out there. We are causing that. 80%, 90% of all antibiotics on the planet are given to farm animals. So we're eating it. They're shitting and pissing it out into the environment. It's going into the river courses. It's going into the seas. We are putting human waste on crops to fertilize land. We're importing human waste to put on land, which has all got antibiotic residues and antibiotic resistant superbugs in it, onto our soils. Dolphins are getting affected by this. It's in our oceans. Surfers are getting antibiotic resistant bacteria in their bodies. This antibiotic resistant bacteria not only sits in our guts and is resistant to antibiotics, it can also grow a fucking arm and poke the fucking unrelated bacteria next door in our stomach and say, here's some DNA to protect you from the antibiotics. This is frightening shit. Most of it is coming from farmed animals. Most of it is coming from farmed animals. This is why vegan is the best way forward. This is why following a vegan lifestyle or even a totally plant-based lifestyle is the ultimate thing you can do. But we're still not safe. That's the scary thing. Us as vegans, we're not safe because it's been put on the soils. It's in the water. Go for a swim in the sea and we can take this on board as well. But the whole world needs to come together on this to stop it. The whole world needs to stop this. Otherwise, like they say, in a few decades' time, antibiotics will not work. And what will that mean? It will mean if I just fall over and scrape my knee and get infected, I'm a goner. From a scuffed knee, I'm a goner. We need to bring this to the forefront. We need to spread this around. Everybody needs to be talking about this. This is frightening shit. This is Armageddon. This is how the human race is going to end. I'll leave you with this speech by this lady. But in the meantime, save the animals, save the planet, save yourself. Go vegan and stop the fucking superbugs.
I'm Dame Sally Davis. I'm the UK's Special Envoy for Antimicrobial Resistance. I'm very concerned about antibiotics in the environment, and we don't see enough evidence of the United Nations Environment Agency taking this seriously. Across the world, we need to improve sewage, we need to take action to prevent these antibiotics getting into our water system and draining out into the seas and the oceans. We all have to care about antimicrobial resistance. We see already illness and deaths related to this. At least 25,000 a year in Britain. It is growing all the time. In fact, doing nothing, by 2050, more people will die of antimicrobial resistance than of cancer each year. It's a global problem. Across the world, even on a limited number of resistant bacteria, we would see 10 million deaths every year by 2050 if no action is taken. In the 28 minutes of this programme, if we'd been listening in 2050, more than 550 people would have died. 1 person will die every 3 seconds by 2050 if we don't take action starting now. 1 person will die every 3 seconds by 2050 if we don't take action starting now. 1 person will die every 3 seconds by 2050 if we don't take action starting now.